Okay, picture this. You're sitting down to a completely decadent, sweet, incredibly satisfying slice of cake. But instead of that inevitable sugar crash or, that wave of guilt you usually get, you know for a fact that every single bite is actually working to extend your life. Sounds like magic, right? Well, today in this explainer, we're going to break down a recipe that does exactly that. We are doing a deep dive, step by step, of the banana walnut cake with blackberry almond butter sauce.
So, can a cake actually help you age better? It kind of challenges everything we usually think about dessert, doesn't it? Our culinary journey today is anchored around a really unique, whole food, plant based recipe straight from Dr. Michael Greger's How Not to Age cookbook. It's a completely different paradigm for baking. We're swapping out all those refined flours, butter, and processed sugars for ingredients that actively support your body's cellular health. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what I mean. Drawn directly from the longevity recipe database, the specific ingredients in this banana walnut cake are actually flagged for their ability to fight age-related artery stiffness and, believe it or not, even cancer. On top of that, the blackberry almond butter sauce we'll be making contains compounds noted for helping to prevent hip fractures and upper respiratory tract infections. So we aren't just baking a sweet treat here, we are literally cooking up preventative medicine.
All right, let's jump right into phase one, prepping and wet ingredients.
Step one is creating what plant-based bakers call a flax egg. This is basically going to bind our whole cake together without using actual eggs. In a small cup or bowl, you're going to combine exactly 1 tablespoon of ground flax seeds with 2 tablespoons of warm water. Give it a really good stir. Now, the absolute crucial point here is the rest time. You have to set this aside for 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, the flaxseed absorbs the water and thickens up into this nice gel-like consistency. While your flax mixture is doing its thing, let's talk step two, which is getting your oven ready. You need to preheat it to exactly 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 175 degrees Celsius. You'll also want to grab an 8-inch square baking pan and line it with parchment paper so your cake comes out easily later on. Now, I've got to share this fantastic pro tip we pulled from a recipe review by the YouTube channel PB with J. If you've ever struggled to get that stiff parchment paper to fit nicely into a square pan, just crumple it up into a tight ball first and then smooth it back out. Seriously, it completely breaks the tension in the paper, allowing it to mold perfectly into the corners of your 8-inch pan. It's an absolute game changer. Okay, step 3. Let's get our wet ingredients together in a large mixing bowl. Here are your precise measurements. You need 1.5 cups of mashed ripe bananas, which usually takes about 2 to 3 large ones. To that, add a 1/4 cup of unsweetened soy milk, a 1/4 cup of date syrup, 1 teaspoon of fresh lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and finally, drop in that thickened flaxseed mixture you made back in step 1. You're going to mix all of this together really, really well. And a quick sidebar on those bananas. We found a great insight from the food blog MJ and Hungry Man. When you're baking this type of whole food cake, the browner the banana, the better. Overripe bananas mash way more easily and deliver a much bolder, sweeter flavor. Because you're maximizing that natural sweetness and moisture from the fruit, Dr. Greger's recipe only requires that tiny 1/4 cup of date syrup to make the whole cake perfectly sweet.
Moving right along to phase 2, dry ingredients and baking.
For step 4, grab a whisk and blend these precise dry ingredients directly into your wet mixture. You're going to need 1 cup of almond flour, a 1/2 cup of oat flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Whisk it until it's evenly mixed. But listen, pay close attention here. A universal rule for tender cakes, and our sources totally echo this, is do not overmix the batter. Just stir lightly until those dry pockets of flour disappear. If the batter feels way too thick, you can stir in a little more soy milk, but just 1 tablespoon at a time. Step 5 brings the crunch. Gently fold in a 1/2 cup of coarsely crushed walnuts. These walnuts provide this incredible texture, healthy fats, and a nutty flavor that just perfectly balances out those sweet bananas. Once that's folded in, transfer your batter into your prepared parchment-lined pan. Smooth out the top with a spatula and pop it into your 350-degree oven. You're going to bake this for about 30 minutes until the top is lightly browned. When it's done, set the pan aside to cool completely before you even think about inverting it onto a plate to cut it into squares. Now for phase 3, blending the blackberry sauce. This is where the magic really happens.
This sauce adds that crucial bit of healthy decadence to spoon right over the top of the cake. Here are the exact measurements you'll need. A 3/4 cup of blackberries, a 1/4 cup of unsweetened soy milk, 3 tablespoons of almond butter, 3 tablespoons of date syrup, and 1 teaspoon of fresh lemon juice. Now, the really great thing about this sauce is how flexible it is. The recipe notes that if fresh blackberries aren't in season, Thawed frozen blackberries work perfectly. You can even sub in blueberries, raspberries, or chopped mango if that's more your vibe.
Step 6. Making the sauce is incredibly simple. You literally just toss all of those ingredients into a blender or a food processor and puree them until completely smooth. You can use it right away or cover and pop it in the fridge. But here's a pro tip directly from the recipe notes. This sauce might thicken up if it sits for a while. If that happens, no big deal. Just give it a stir before serving and add up to 1 additional tablespoon of soy milk to thin it back out to a nice, pourable consistency. Finally, phase 4. Serving and the verdict. All right, the cake is cooled, the sauce is ready. But let's keep it real for a second. We always want to set realistic expectations. This super candid review from the PB with J channel perfectly illustrates what to expect when you're baking for longevity. Because this cake relies so heavily on those 1.5 cups of mashed bananas for moisture instead of butter or oil, the crumb is very different from a traditional sponge cake. The reviewer actually found it a little mushy, giving the cake itself a B grade. However, that blackberry almond butter sauce, it was a massive hit, earning an A+. So definitely expect a dense, highly moist, almost bread pudding-like texture from the cake, which is then totally transformed by an absolutely killer, flavor-packed berry sauce.
And that brings us to the end of our culinary explainer. We've just walked through a precise, health-promoting recipe that swaps out literally every traditional baking vice for a whole food, life-extending virtue. It really begs the question, are you ready to rethink what dessert means? Are you ready to embrace treats that don't just taste good, but actually nourish your body and promote a longer, healthier life? Well, the recipe is in your hands now. Happy baking!